Hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming and for joining us. There might be a lot of people on this call, and so if you're not speaking, if you could try to keep yourself muted, we would appreciate it. If I happen to mute you, please don't take it personally. You can always unmute yourself, but yeah, we'll probably have people coming in over the next few minutes, but thank you so much for joining us, and looking forward to hearing people share some stories and some memories of Patrick. So thank you so much for joining us. And I've got a few, but I'm basically also admitting people and sort of serving as the technical person here. So if anybody else wants to get us started, I can do that. Please do so.
Oh, that's right. Well, he's busy now. Well, let's take a second and do that.
All right.
People can.
We're going to take a second and we're going to take a picture of the three of us. So of Marek and Tom and I, and we'll be back in a second. If anyone wants to get the conversation started and unmute themselves, please do so.
So good to see everybody. Looking to see more. Hi, Pete and Louise.
Hi, Rick. How are you doing? Good to see you. Hi, Francis.
Hello.
Yeah, everybody. Oh, there's Francis too.
My goodness. I have to say hi to Susu Knight. Susu, it's Becky. I haven't seen you in a million years. How are you? You're muted.
Folks, if you want to speak, you can just press your space bar, which will unmute you, and then when you release it, you go back on mute, kind of like a talk key on a radio.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Susu.
Yes. Okay. Hello, Becky. It's great to see you.
I have to tell you,
other people too.
yes, I inherited the two pictures of your paintings that Patrick had, and I am so proud that they're now hanging in my house. And thank you for that. And one of your poems. It's the poem that was in Patrick's bathroom.
Yes. Right.
Maybe we should speak no further of.
or right, maybe, but it was very famous in its time.
It was.
It was in more bar bathrooms than in Utah, and I think it even got to Nevada some. So.
Oh,
it's great to see you.
It's great to see you. And everybody else. Is that Claudia? Hi, Claudia.
And Adela.
Yeah.
And Stephen.
Susu,
Hi, Stephen.
Hi.
Hi, Stephen.
Hey, Becky.
It's so good to see you.
It's great to see you. And Susu.
Hi to Walter. Hi to Nick and Claudia. Boy, this is great. Francis, I said hi to you. Hello, it's good to see you.
Rick, it's Tully. Can you hear me?
Tully. Hi, Tully. I
Hi.
haven't seen you since university days.
Can you see me?
I sure can.
Hi, Rick and Tully. It's Kathy and Craig.
Hi, Kathy and Craig.
Hi, you two.
How you doing?
Well, I'm going through chemotherapy right now, so
I'm so sorry.
Oh,
I'm a little under the weather, but the prognosis is good. I got diagnosed with Hodgkin lymphoma in March, but I've
I'm
just
so
had.
sorry.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure I'll pull through. I've supposed to have 8 treatments and I just finished my 4th. So I'm glad to be able to be here now, and I prepared a few things to say if it's appropriate.
It's appropriate.
Go ahead.
First, I want to say thank you, Tully, for playing on so many of the songs from the memorial service. I know you were the music. You were on the two Aldaviva songs. So yes, thank you for being a part of it.
My pleasure. Originally I was, Todd Woodbury and I were talking about maybe playing that Ashokan Farewell, but you guys did an admirable job at that. So it was good to see you both, to see Patrick's son playing music. That just brought joy to my heart.
I can see them up here.
Thank you. It was a bit intimidating knowing that we were going to be broadcasting to a group that consisted of so many professional musicians. So I think
No,
we got
you guys-
it was nice that they were able to.
You did it was fabulous.
Thanks.
It was.
It really
Yeah.
was. And as a matter of fact, your dear departed father taught me to love practicing music more than performance music. So, and that's still true today. It was lovely to see you both and hear from you both.
Thank you, Susu.
Yeah.
Get that.
What a beautiful service. It brought tears to my eyes at the end. So, wow. Well, I just,
Susu, this is Craig Feinschreiber. Remember when we visited you?
I do indeed, Craig. I recognized you when you gave that wonderful part of the memorial.
Well, thank you. I want you to know that I still have your carrot at a very proud place in my kitchen.
Yes, it is.
Well, I'm delighted. Not edible, however.
Tully, did you want?
yeah.
Did you want to say
Yeah,
something? You mentioned you had a few things to share. You want to kick us off?
Well, okay, sure. I don't know exactly how long this is going to last, but I thought that, there's so many memories, so many ways that your father was helpful to me in my career that I can't even begin to list them all. But I thought I would say this much. You might already know this stuff, but anyway, I met Pat around 1972 or 73, just after graduating from high school in Salt Lake, when Dr. Bill Fowler, a former guitar teacher of mine and professor at the University of Utah, was active organizing the new jazz program at Westminster College and bringing guitarists together in the community. He suggested that I get to know Pat. Pat was a bassist in the Utah Symphony and also interested in the classical guitar at that point, and had done some plucked string work as an extra with the Utah Symphony, and I think with the Santa Fe Opera as well. We got together several times at his apartment on Capitol Hill to play duets. And so, I actually became friends with your dad before I left, for Boston and New York. I was gone for about 9 years, but so he was a friend before all of that. And I left Salt Lake in 1976 to go to music school and eventually got my first job teaching music theory and guitar at Mannes College of Music in New York City. I got back in touch with Pat when I decided to return to Salt Lake in 1985 to go to graduate school in music composition at the U of U. By this time, Pat was performing with the Salt Lake Chamber Ensemble, with fellow Utah musicians Eric Groff, Rick Nobis, and John Thompson. The ensemble commissioned me to write a piece for their 1986 season, the result of which was my introduction and Allegro, which also served as my first big project for my master's program. So, I immediately had a big a commission to focus on right when I got back to Salt Lake. And so it was, it was a professional engagement aside from my my master's studies. So it was really a big shot in the arm, and it meant very much to me. Pat was interested in early music at this point and had learned to play the viola da gamba, a bowed instrument with frets. So Pat provided me with the opportunity to not only compose a piece, but also to learn to write for this unusual instrument. Pat immediately introduced me to Christopher Wilkins, associate conductor with the Utah Symphony. And what followed was the long, productive association of writing arrangements, compositions, and also performing as an extra. You know, Pat's the one that got me into playing as an extra and with the plucked strings with the Utah Symphony. So, and that lasted for quite a while. I think the last time I played with the Utah Symphony as an extra was with Keith Lockhart's farewell concert back in, when was it, 2008 or something. So he really, you know, opened that door for me. He also got me involved in the Nova Chamber Music Series and the Utah Opera. I ended up playing in such masterworks as Mozart's Don Giovanni and Rossini's Barber of Seville. So yeah, like you guys were mentioning, where he would talk people into learning how to play instruments that we wouldn't otherwise maybe play. He got me into the mandolin, and that was really a turning point for me in my career with my composition. In the early 1990s, Pat became deeply interested in the mandolin, influenced by his father, Marty, who had played mandolin as a youth and in his retirement from playing clarinet with the USO. With Pat's infectious enthusiasm, he convinced me to learn to play the mandolin, and he organized an all Vivaldi summer concert with the USO. You remember when he got so excited about Vivaldi?
Yeah.
A bit, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
actually,
It might have been before your time, but anyway, he organized this all Vivaldi concert for a summer program with the Utah Symphony up at Snowbird, and we had I don't know, we had mandolins, guitars, and strings. And I couldn't believe I was doing it because I hadn't actually been playing that long, but he just told me I could do it. And we ended up having a grand, having a grand time. He was very brave. So I'll skip through some of this, but and you've already talked about Alda Viva, but that for me as a composer, you know, was a great opportunity to write. And I actually learned how to play the mandola in that group. And you know, when I expressed interest in the mandolin, you know, my father, who's a pathologist, was also an instrument maker, and he started making me instruments. So Pat is, you know, was kind of the impetus for my dad to switch from making violins to making mandolins. And he made me a mandola, and that's the instrument that I played in Alda Viva. So, and then I ended up writing some music for the Modern Mandolin Quartet that was recorded. And that's all, you know, traceable back to Pat getting me involved in the mandolin. So I owe him a great debt of gratitude for that. So just a couple more things I wanted to say. Another way that Pat was super important in my career was in 1992, I was hired to write a documentary score for KUED. And the producer wanted a half an hour of chamber music for I proposed a 15-piece chamber orchestra. And I only had about 2 weeks to write it. And I was completely freaked out, like that I wasn't gonna, you know, finish it. And so, and I realized that I couldn't pay union scale. And that there was a kind of a project that had never really come up in Salt Lake. And I couldn't pay union scale, and even within the budget that I was given. So I made an agreement with the union, and Pat helped me to pick an orchestra, and really saved me from the stress of having to put together that orchestra for the recording session. And he was my advocate for me. That's actually when I quit the union. And he was an advocate for me to do that, explaining the situation. So he was always so supportive of me. It's really, I'm just so grateful. As I look back on our shared path as musicians, I realize how much Pat was like an older brother and mentor, and I will always deeply appreciate how many doors he opened for me. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Tully. And
I have a couple of things to say. As a pediatrician, one of the joys is taking care of kids of people you respect. And you guys were part of my pediatric practice. And,
I do too.
yeah, so the other thing that was interesting is that Cliff Butter and Paul Rasmussen and I started having breakfast with Pat. We'd go to the Triple Fork Lodge, or we'd go to Hub and Spoke, and then he once he once treated us to breakfast at Friendship Manor, and it was like, I don't think so. We don't have to do this again, do we? Can we, you want to? It was great, right, Cliff?
It was hysterically funny. We had so much fun. We would drink coffee and say to each other, "I'll tell you what, I'll tell," just like old men in a coffee clutch. It was just beautiful and wonderful.
It was.
well, hey, I have a story I want to share real quick. So first off, I want to say thank you to everybody for joining us, and I also want to in particular call out right now Lloyd Abrams, who is Patrick's cousin, Martin's nephew, and Patrick didn't have many cousins, but he was close to a few that he had, and I really appreciate Lloyd joining us today. And he also happened to be visiting when, as I mentioned in my talk, 15 years to the day after Martin died, Patrick died. And when Martin died, the Abrams were in town at the time, and were actually there to be with Martin on the night that he died, which really meant a lot to us. And I want to sort of say how much I know that Patrick's relationship with his father, Martin, meant to him, and how important that was that love was to him and to us. Particularly, not that this really matters, but that Martin was actually Pat's adopted father. And Martin adopted Pat when Pat was 12 years old. And there's a story that I want to share real quick. I know my family and my immediate family is very sick of this story because it's one of my favorites. But I don't know I think most of the people on this call haven't heard it. So Patrick's biological father, he never actually even met. Like he has no memories of him, and just a few, few stories and a few facts. And so 3 years ago, I decided I was going to try to find out what I could about Don Kirchen. And I wasn't expecting to find anything or very much at all, but I was rather blown away by what I was able to find about Don, but even more so about Patrick's biological grandfather, a guy named John Kirchen. And so real quick, I want to first, this was in the slideshow, but I'm going to share a photo real quick. So the little guy who is in the vehicle is Patrick, and the older guy who is standing above him is John Kirchin. He would last couple of years of his life, and Patrick got to know his grandfather, John, a little tiny bit. He had some vague memories of John, but didn't really know much about him. And what I was able to find out is that John Kirchin, and I'll bring this up now, was not particularly surprising given his descendants, but John Kirchin was a left-wing radical, was an out-and-out left-wing radical, and was involved in pretty much every single left-wing organization and cause throughout the first half of the 20th century. And probably my favorite thing that I found was that in 1917, he lost his job as a public school teacher in Portland, Oregon, for the offense of teaching about evolution. In a public trial that I think was not just a precursor to, but was actually a direct influence upon the famous Scopes monkey trial of 1925. And I'm going to zoom in on this one just because I love the list of accusations. So that's a drawing of Patrick's grandfather. So Mark, my great grandfather, and he was accused of the following heresies within the trial. These are the words from the newspaper, but these are the heresies that he was accused of advocating in 1917. These were birth control, free love, IWWism, atheism, pragmatism, can't have that, single tax, socialism, and evolution. So I remember running across this newspaper article and being like, okay, yeah, I see it. I can certainly see that being Patrick's grandfather. So yeah. And I say that I think it was an influence upon the Scopes monkey trial because there's a lot more that I can say, and I'll try to write something about this at some point later on. But when he lost his job, he became kind of a cause celeb for a lot of the radical left-wing community in the Pacific Northwest at the time. And one of his most prominent defenders was this guy named C.E.S. Wood, who was probably the most prominent sort of left-wing speaker in Oregon at the time. And C.E.S. Wood was the best friend of Clarence Darrow. And Clarence Darrow is the guy that 8 years after John Kirchin's trial was the defense attorney in the famous Scopes monkey trial in 1925. So I suspect that the example of our great grandfather here was actually a direct catalyst in Clarence Darrow's decision to take that case, and in that case becoming such a big thing. So that was pretty cool, and that was something that I did not at all expect to find, and was absolutely delighted when I did. So anyways, there's more I can say about this, and I found a lot about Muriel as well, and she has a 280-page FBI file with orders to spy on her signed by J. Edgar Hoover. So there's more to this story and its intersection with left-wing politics in the first half of the 20th century. But this was one of my favorite things that I found.
That is a really cool story. Can you see me by any chance? Or
Yeah.
just hear me? Can you see me? I just want to tell a really quick story because back in the early 70s, I was attending the university as a little punk, and there was a music professor at the university, Paul Banham, and I know a lot of you know Paul, but Paul used to have these fundraisers before Halloween, and he'd have this party. It was like a 3-day party at his house, 24 hours a day for 3 days. And all these people would come in, and it was just a bohemian, crazy, wild time. And I was a little teeny Pike, and I thought, oh, this is cool. College is cool because you get to do this kind of stuff. And we were at the party, and I didn't really know. I knew some of my friends were there, but there were all these professors and, you know, older students. And Patrick, these 3 guys came in. They were in complete drag. I mean, just really good drag. And they wandered around the party, assuming these characters of these really kind of floozy women. And I was just awestruck at how that consistently for hours and hours, they kept these characters. Patrick was at the lead of this group. And I remember at that party, at one point, James Prigmore stood on a kitchen table and sang the English words to a Beethoven symphony. We were all a little high, I think, but it was really my first introduction to Patrick. It's the first time that I really met him. And after that, I had a group of friends that played traditional music. So we considered ourselves kind of drive-by musicians. We weren't real musicians like Patrick and the symphony people, but we had our little niche in the community, and we played our music. And Patrick in those days was actually in a bluegrass band. And so we had a lot of crossover friends that he mixed with. So he played in both those genres quite comfortably, and it was really wonderful. And I've known him for so many years. He's really kind of a core part of what I consider being a citizen in Salt Lake. He's really like the mountains here. He represents really the texture and the quality of what my life has been. And I really miss it.
I have a quick story about Patrick. One of his musical escapades, and by the way, it's so great to see all of you. It's wonderful, even if we're not in person. But you didn't know that he was actually in a nightclub band with me and Jerry Tertoka. Do you remember Jerry Tertoka, the guitar player?
Yes.
Well, the 3 of us decided we were going to get a New Year's gig. And somehow I got us a New Year's gig at this dive restaurant, this bar on State Street, about 9th South and State Street. And we had a classical guitar player and a classical bass player and me. And all they wanted was rock and roll. So all we could do was Route 66. And we did it over and over and over. And they finally asked us to leave. So we left, and we were so dispirited that we went to get something to eat at a restaurant. And Patrick couldn't deal with all of this failure. So when the waitress came over, he pulled his pants down and mooned the waitress. That was the man I was married to for 8 years.
We know, Becky, we know.
I know. And he didn't just moon the waitress. I could, all the different moons he did were just, they were epic. Out of cars, out of car windows, you know, I mean, it's just.
The one at the symphony was pretty good.
Well, he put a lot of effort into his ass. So
He put a lot of effort into his ass. You know, and he wanted everyone to see it, every chance he could get them. Yeah.
Becky, I just retired the Saliva Sisters t-shirt, not too many decades ago.
Oh my gosh.
And I wanted to say at least how I met Patrick.
Please.
Though we were in high school together, we really didn't know one another. I think we knew who each was, but I met Patrick at the Art Barn. Robert Browning was living there in those days. And he was in his sailor suit in a corner, And I can't remember anything much about talking, but I do remember that I believe he had not asked to leave being a sailor, and so was on a sort of let's call it AWOL. Though I think that got straightened out somewhere along the way. In any event, I miss him. I miss him. He had such a big heart. It was a heart that deflated quite easily and got so full that it was almost always exploding. But and I couldn't keep up with that ever. I became, I think, the sort of disapproving schoolmarm in some ways. But oh, I loved him so dearly, and he's the last of what I think of as the first beloveds in my life: Robert, Patrick, and Ray, and I miss them all.
Robert, Patrick reconnected very deeply with Robert in the when they met again at a protest rally in the early 90s. And so when I was living in California, when Pat was around, we'd go and visit Robert and his wife. And Robert actually died about 3 years ago. And in early 2018, one of the reasons that I wanted to look up and do some genealogy research and the like is that Pat's health, kind of taken a south turn, and we didn't know how much longer he'd be around. So I wanted to see if I could spend as much time with him as I could while I had the opportunity. And Robert passed away, and my dad wanted to make it to Berkeley and attend Robert's funeral so badly that he basically developed a new lease on life in order to get there. He started exercising, he started eating better, and it was like Lazarus, I mean, it was to make it to Robert's memorial service, he kind of said, all right, I'm going to come back to life for a little while longer. And it was really a blessing for us. And yeah, Robert was one of his oldest and dearest friends, along with you, Susu. And I've got a picture I want to share real quick. You mentioned the art barn, but one of the pictures from the slideshow was I don't think it wasn't when he was a sailor, but it was not too long after that. So that is Patrick playing guitar in the art barn as a very young man. And yeah, you mentioned him going AWOL from the Navy.
Several times.
Several
times.
multiple times actually. In I think maybe a year that he was there, he managed to go AWOL multiple times. And
he was an abysmal sailor.
He was a really bad sailor and member of the military.
But he got really high ASVAB scores.
Yeah.
Like they wanted him to do like cryptographic work.
Yeah, they said
he was extremely good at decoding and had analytical talent, and
wow,
he just wanted to be a bohemian.
Yeah, they could tell he was very smart. Just the discipline of the military was a very, very poor fit for Patrick Zwick. And so one of the things that I've gone over a lot of his old things, and he has his discharge papers, and you mentioned this many times, but he didn't get a dishonorable discharge, but it specifically says right there, it says not recommended for re-enlistment.
Oh, Jesus.
Well, Dylan, could I chime in here for a moment?
Of course.
For me, this whole afternoon has been very moving, and one of the reasons people spoke so well and spoke as if it were from my own heart. And it was particularly interesting to me because Pat and I had no mutual friends. I met Dylan and Mark before, and spent a couple of hours with Becky one time. But apart from that, we had no overlap. And we also almost never saw each other for the past 50 years. But how we saw each other initially was the summer of 1969 in Santa Fe, when we were both working for the Santa Fe Opera. We shared a house. We became housemates at 505 Cerrillos Road, a house which no longer exists, as I established some years later, driving past the spot where it was. It's not there anymore, except in memory. And I'm not sure exactly how that happened. Pat had been in Santa Fe before. Probably he found a house and needed a housemate. And somehow we got together, but it turned out to be quite a riotous summer. We had a very good time, of course, working a lot, but also having a good time, and with post-performance revelry at Tiny's Bar, and a lot of time for conversation on every conceivable topic, as so many of you have indicated. Pat had this unlimited universal interest and passion about life and about subjects. So that we had, I think, 9 weeks of pretty intense contact. And after that, I have tried to figure out how many times we saw each other. I think 5 times, which is an average of about once every 10 years. I live in Berlin, and I'm in Chicago now. I came here yesterday, and Pat did visit one time in Berlin, and then one time when I had a concert in Provo, he drove me there, but didn't stay for the concert. He was tired. He drove back to Salt Lake, but and then a couple of times in Salt Lake City, and what was going to be the 6th time didn't quite happen, and it was my 76th birthday in September of 2019, and in Chicago at the Cliff Dwellers Club on Lake Michigan, and Pat was planning to come to that. He bought plane tickets, and I had found a place for him to stay close. We were walking around the corner from the Cliff Dwellers, and one day before, he called me up and said he didn't think he was up to it. And I had looked forward to that so much. One of the reasons being that we didn't have mutual friends, but a lot of my old school chums from kindergarten and so forth were going to be there. And it was a chance, I thought, for them to meet him and for him to meet a few of my friends too. And it was a beautiful evening with an incredible moonrise over the lake. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. And that would have been, I guess, the last time we would have met had it happened. And when Pat passed away, I didn't know about it, but he didn't answer emails, and Facebook postings came to an end, and I thought, this is not right. And I Googled around and indeed found an obituary, and I felt so much the lack of anybody to talk to about it, because I didn't know any of his friends, except that I called up Becky then. I just needed somebody to talk to who knew what I was talking about, and to know what the loss was. And I'm very grateful to Dylan and Mark for including me in this event today. It meant a lot, and so many of you said things that I've thought and would have wanted to say as well, as you all have.
Well, thank you, Philip, so much. I want to say that the last time that you did see him, when you were here in Salt Lake, he like a couple months, I think, before the visit, he told me about how excited he was that you were coming, and he was like, "Oh, my old friend Philip Mall is coming," and it was like a celebrity was going to be in town. He was so excited to see you. And I also remember that at the beginning of 2018, there was a week or so where I think he screwed up his dosage on some of the medication that he was on. And so he had a rather loopy time. And I remember seeing some emails that he sent at that time, including some emails to you that I think were fairly nonsensical. And you replied to them with aplomb and with grace. And I appreciated that. But yeah, I remember seeing it. It was just like, Dad, don't email for like the next week or so. But yeah, he really treasured your friendship, and as I said, just was so happy when he was.
Well, even though we over the 50 years we spent so little time together, I guess that one summer that we were together, a lot happened somehow. We got firmly implanted in each other's consciousness. And it wasn't hard to do. It was impossible not to like him, and he inspired great loyalty, as we all know.
Yeah, thank you so much. And do you want to grab
Hey, Dylan?
Yes.
Am I on?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to circle back for a minute because you said your dad kind of cleaned up his act or got a little bit healthy at the end there, where he took the oxygen out and everything. And we were at a breakfast when he finally did lose the oxygen under his nose, and his color was really good. He'd cut his hair, and I walked up to the cafe table, and I said, look at you, what's going on? And you claim it was for some other reason that he was getting, but he looked me right in the eyes and he said, I got a girlfriend. I just wanted to get that out because that's what he told the coffee clutch. I got a girlfriend.
Yeah. So I think there's a causality thing there. Getting healthier, his kind of revitalization probably was a cause of him getting the girlfriend, and not caused by the girlfriend. But yeah, that is definitely it's a virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
Philip mentioned mentioned Santa Fe and the opera there, and Patrick performed there many summers over the years, and including, I think, in 1983, he played Le Lute in a revival of I think it's called Lorione, but it's a I think an Elizabethan opera, and L'Oreo, yes. And he had a poster or a picture of a cloth from a ticket from that he. I remember this, from when I was a real little kid. But this was one of the pictures that hung on Patrick's wall everywhere he lived. That sort of let you know immediately that this was Pat's house and this was Pat's room. And it was from the Santa Fe Opera in 1983.
Cool.
I've got a quick one.
Yes.
In about the late, well, like Cliff said, Cliff and I played traditional music together forever. But back in the 70s, sort of Patrick and those guys were sort of the next level up. They were kind of out of our league. But I was in the late 70s, I was dating a girl that played first violin in the symphony. And they were doing a gig in Durango, and she invited me to come over and see it. Well, I had to work, but I had this little Fiat 124 Sport Coupe that I jumped in after work, and I just highballed it to Durango, and I got there just as the concert was over. But I got there in time to meet all those guys at the Orr House in Durango. And that's really the first time that I ever really met Patrick. Oh. And we're sitting at the table, and here I am, sort of this scruffy kid, and those guys are all in their tails and stuff. And the waiter comes around, and Patrick takes out the wine list and he says, we'd like a bottle of the Petit Shiraz. Only it was a Shiraz. He really got the roll of the R in there, And I just thought, this guy's a man of the world. This guy is so cool. Well, later, much later, in fact, probably a couple of years ago, I was telling Pat that story, and he said, I don't think I knew what Petit Cheval was. He says, I just thought the name sounded exotic. But ever since that time, anytime I'm traveling around anywhere in the West, I call Pat to find out what the good restaurant is. He always knows.
Yeah.
Well, the first time I met Patrick, once again, Jerry Tertoka and I, it was Terry and Tertoka. And we had this little duet that we were doing in bars all over the city. And we were at DB Cooper's and we were singing along, and I had heard about this magnificent Patrick Zwick. I'd heard about him from other musicians I was working with, but he was the best musician in town. And I'm playing there, I'm singing, and Jerry is playing, and I look to the back, and there, standing in the doorway, is this man with his full beard and a long cape. He had his cape on and this arched eyebrow. And Jerry said, "That's Patrick Zwick." Wow. I thought he was a Russian czar.
Yeah.
You know, I thought, man, this guy is the most amazing guy. The next time I met him, I was dating this, well, it's our first date, this bassoonist from the Utah Symphony. And this hilarious guy comes and joins us, and he's clean shaven, and he's got a striped t-shirt on and shorts, and it's Patrick Zwick. And he's cracking all these blue jokes and horning in on this guy that I dated. In fact, that's the night we started dating, I know. And it was kind of this contrast of, I couldn't believe that this was the same guy that had that arched eyebrow and that cape. He'd just come from a symphony, and he had several capes. You probably all know that, right? That he wore capes a lot. Yeah, he had this cape on. So yeah, anyway, he was a man of great extremes. And he took me right out from underneath this bassoon player, and the bassoon player was mad at him for a very long time.
You know, I just want to say, first of all, Mark and Dylan and Tom, it's one of the most moving memorial services I've been to. And the older I get, the more they come along. But thank you so much for such a beautiful service. I mentioned that, well, first of all, it reminded me of things I'd forgotten, because it's so many years that he and I shared this rich relationship, and I watched him go through, you know, changes on a weekly, if not daily basis in his appearance and his apparel. But like I said, there was that one time where, I don't know, for whatever reason, but we were feuding, and we didn't talk to each other. Even when the piano was over stage left in front of the basses, we refused to speak to each other. Until one morning, the orchestra was on tour, one of those famous school concert tours, and I think we're in Vernal, Utah or something, or Duchesne. And I got up really early. I couldn't sleep, and it was dawn. And I remember walking up this lonely road, and in my thoughts, and they were coming from the other direction. Somebody was coming from the other direction. And the closer we got together, I could see it was Pat. And I realized we had no choice but to walk right next to each other. So we did, and I said, "Hi, Pat." And he said, "Hi, Rick." And then we were friends again for the rest of his life. So that's Pat. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Rick, I love that you can't remember why you were having a feud. I think that's a really cool story, that you can't remember why. That's great.
That might be what happened there, is that you both kind of realized we don't remember why we're mad at each other.
Pretty much.
I remember those times, though. I remember that feud, because it reverberated a little bit beyond your own relationship, because we had heard about it in the community.
Oh, man.
I know.
I believe Randolph Kelly has a hand raised. Randolph, do you?
Yeah, well, you can call me Randy.
Hey, Randy.
This will be nice and short. I knew your dad. I grew up in Portland, Oregon. And I'm a violist. I was the principal violist of the Pittsburgh Symphony for 43 years until this last year. And the last time I saw your dad there was a library convention at Heinz Hall in Pittsburgh. I can't remember when this was, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I don't know. So all I wanted to say was this. So I was 18 years old. I went to Sun Valley. It's not the music festival that's there, which I've played many times, but it was a smaller music camp and a festival. And Sally Peck, who was the principal violist at the time, taught there. We got along great, and she offered me a job. Mr. Bravanel offered me a job in the Utah Symphony, and I came in and sat last chair, and I was 18 years old. I'd never lived on my own. And the reason I mention this is that my time in Utah was only there for 2 years. I auditioned and I went to Curtis. After that in Philadelphia for 4 years, and I went on invited, and I won the audition in Pittsburgh. But those 2 years in Utah, your dad was, I was this kid, 18 years old, never lived on my own. And I had so many friends there, and your dad and I hung out. He was a crazy man. And I'm 69. I think how old was your dad? He was supposed to turn 80 recently.
Yeah, his 80th birthday would have been 2 days ago, actually.
Right, I saw that. So Pat, I'm 69, so Pat's about 11. He's about 11 years older than me. So I'm this kid. And these guys, so I was 18, so he was 28, 29 years old. And they took me under, they were so great to me. It was, you probably don't know these names, but it was your dad, a guy named Tom Barron, who was a violinist.
Tom Barron
also, yeah. And Tom at the time they were all motorcycle. Your dad had a motorcycle. Tom had a motorcycle. A very good friend of mine who I've just recently got in touch with, David Lindblom. Mm-hmm. He was my buddy in the viola section. Well, David, we had great times. I did the tour, 5-week South American tour with a Bravanel. And oh man, those 2 years were some of the best times for me, with so many friends, making a lot of music in Salt Lake and up at the university. And your dad was always great to me. I was his kid, and I was like their mascot. And we had some crazy times in Buenos Aires, man. It was crazy. But I loved it, and I've never forgotten those times. I never have, and I'm done now. But I'm one of the real old timers. So it's cool.
Brand. I should add that the names Tom Barron and David Lindblom actually mean I definitely know who they are. Tom was one of Pat's closest friends and was his best man at his fourth wedding to Mary Lindblom.
Okay. To Mary Lindblom. They married Dave's sister.
Mary Lindblom, yes. So yeah, David's
cool.
Mary Lindblom, the cellist. So yes,
yeah,
the names that I know very well. And yeah, thank you so much, Randy.
Yeah, it's this is something I've sort of in and out on your thing, but it's been great to listen to everybody. And I'll get off because you guys know him better than I do. But
well, wait, Randy, did they ever sneak you into the winery in Salt Lake when you were young? Oh,
no, but they did all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
Oh man, crazy! It was crazy, but it was so much fun, and I worked very hard while I was there. I practiced like a maniac. Sally Peck lived on 3rd Avenue, in the avenues, and I lived at her house for a while because it was too much for me. I'd gone to festivals in the summers, Aspen, whatever, as a kid, that's different, as you all know. But when I moved to Salt Lake, I instantly was downtown at this, this okay little place downtown, and I was lost. And those guys, I mean, it took a little while, but they were, it was cool. They saved me in the orchestra. It was, I don't know if they still have it in the Utah Symphony, but the Saints and the Sinners bus. and the Saints, there was no smoking or drinking, right? And so I was not naturally, but I was on the Sinners bus. The only time I went on the Saints bus is if I needed to sleep. and we go and yeah, I don't know. It was just yeah, Pat was, I didn't see him for years, for a long time, until I saw him in Utah. I mean, in Pittsburgh that one time. But I never forgotten. This was some of the, I went from Utah and those great people, and I went to an insane school to a job that was good, but high, crazy pressure. And I've always thought, what did I leave Salt Lake for? This is crazy. I was making music and having a great time with all these people. And Pat was a part of that. And yeah, I'm sorry that I didn't see him more. But anyway, really colorful guy. He's really good.
Walter, one of the current cellists in the symphony, messaged that they only have Sinner buses now. And I want a photo, and that is a photo of the Sinner bus.
Is that a photo of the city bus?
Some of the members of the Sinner bus. My wife asked what year. I'm not sure what year, but you'll notice that Martin is right over Patrick's shoulder there.
Right.
We're burning the back of his head with a big stogie.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Well, I got along great with your grandfather. I really did. He was a great guy, and
you get along with him, Pat, in many ways.
and then there was the flutist. What was his name?
Eric.
No, it's before him.
Oh.
I know the name. And then it was Cream. The first bassoon at the time I was there was a guy with really long hair. Cream.
Doug Craig.
Creamer. What? Doug Craig. Yes.
Doug Craig. Yeah.
Doug Craig,
and who was his assistant? Young guy.
I forget. Someone
Brad
said
Stortz.
What?
Brad Stortz.
No.
Was it the guy that
Morris
played in the chamber ensemble?
No, there was no chamber ensemble when I was there.
Mitch Morrison, maybe.
Mitch Morrison.
Mitch Morrison, yes, Mitch. Oh yeah. Mitch was nuts. He used to say to me all the time. And I took it really well because I used to practice all the time when we'd be on tour in someplace in southern Utah, wherever. Okay. And I'd be practicing, and Mitch say to me later, he go, Randy, why do you practice so much? You already got the job. but yeah, that's wow. We played concerts in the Tabernacle. I did play in the New Hall once with Previn. Many years ago. It was about oh man, I was in the symphony 43 years. I'd say it was like 38 years ago, 40 years ago I played. It was just new, the hall that you play in now.
Symphony.
So it's called Symphony Hall.
Well, it was Symphony Hall then. It's a Bravenel Hall now.
Oh, did they change it to that's right. They changed it to a Bravenel Hall. Yeah. He was a great guy. Did you ever get a chance to meet
a Bravenel?
Bravenel?
If only like a hello. I was like 12 years, 11 or 12 years old. So I think
yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
Heard many stories.
Yeah.
I think we've got a line.
Okay. Sorry, man.
Oh,
hey,
no.
I'm going on and on. it's done, but I really appreciate this. It's great that you did this for your dad. So it's cool.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah,
Peggy,
thanks.
your hand has been raised. If you'd like to share.
Sure, I'd like to, in the midst of all this hijinks and wonderful, innovative outrageousness of Pat, this is a more sober story about his capacity for compassion, I think you'd call it. So some of you knew my husband, Brooke Hopkins, who had a bicycle accident and became quadriplegic. Pat and Mary came to play in his hospital room at the U up here. And then Brooke was at South Davis, that's a half an hour up the road in Bountiful. And Pat and Mary came 3 times a week to bring coffee from Starbucks and little treats to Brooke for 2 years almost.
Wow.
Can you imagine? 2
That's
years.
really sweet.
3 times a week. And it was an enormously meaningful occasion for all of us. Anyway, thanks, Pat.
Thank you, Peggy. And I want to say that being able to help with Brooke and to get to know Brooke and to become a good friend of his at that time, that was actually a time when Pat was going through some hard times of his own, and being able to have that friendship with Brooke and with you and with everybody around sort of in that orbit was one of the huge things that helped him through that. So it was really meaningful to him as well.
Well, he certainly helped Brooke. So I'm glad it was mutual.
Yeah.
That's great. Thanks for doing all this.
Of course, thank you. Jamie, I think your hand is raised.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dylan. You and Mark, that was just a wonderful service. So thank you so much. I wanted to speak to Rick really quick. I wanted to let you know that you're not alone in being someone who Pat wouldn't talk to for a while. And unlike you, I remember the exact reason, and the reason was that he was mad at my wife, who was also a bass player. For those of you who don't know, I joined the orchestra in 1978, so I worked alongside Pat very closely, and Lisa was a bass player in the orchestra as well, my wife at the time. And for those of you who haven't never played in an orchestra, the interpersonal relationships can get pretty intense from time to time. So he and Lisa had some spat of some sort. So he stopped talking to her, and I had to go along for the ride, apparently, because it was guilt by association, I suppose. And then, not unlike your story, this went on for months and months and months. And I was out in front of then ZCMI, and somehow we ran right into each other. And he all of a sudden just started talking like like nothing had ever happened. So that was just Pat. He was, to work with him, it was wonderful. I had to also laugh at your story about how involved he would be with the music, because with Pat there was no middle ground. The dial was either on 0 or it was on 11. With his playing, it was very funny sometimes, and he was just sort of this lovable scoundrel, I think, in the orchestra for the most part. So anyways, that was just a wonderful service. I worked with Pat. Well, like I say, I joined the orchestra in '78 and worked with him in the bass section until he retired from the bass section, and then of course saw him frequently in the library. And I'm also happy to say we reconnected a little bit a couple years ago and had a couple wonderful lunches down at Kyoto. And he was just the same, always curious, always wanting to know what was going on with the orchestra, and coming to concerts and supporting people. So I loved your dad quite a bit. We didn't socialize much, but we did have some wonderful conversations about music, and I will cherish that. He also gave me a wonderful little picture that he got in a Paris museum of the Viome octo bass, which was a very important instrument, and I will treasure that. So thanks, you guys.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for sharing. And I do remember one time, it wasn't, I don't think, about my wife, but it was about another member of the bass section. I was talking to him, and he was like, yeah, and I don't think I was talking to them at the time. I said, why? And he said, I don't remember. But then he said, but I guarantee it was my fault.
Very funny.
I'm sure it was just me being a jerk. All right, I think Craig said he'd like to say something.
Well, I just had a very poignant story with Pat and Mary that I wanted to share. Kathy and I were over to Pat and Mary's house to spend an evening together, and we were reading poetry aloud to each other, and it was just wonderful. And Mary seemed to like it especially. So I suggested, because Mary was at that point, she was probably she was housebound and bedbound actually. So I offered to Mary to come over to read to her. Well, she thought that was just a wonderful idea, and so we scheduled a morning when I would go over. Well, it turned out that that was the morning that she passed away.
Mm.
And I remember the phone call from Patrick. This is a hard one. He could barely speak because of the sobbing and the tears, and how deeply, deeply sad he was about this. And so I went over there, and I spent a good part of the morning with him. That was to me one of the a kind of relationship that was very profound and very deep and very appreciated by both of them. It was a very moving relationship to watch, and that he would feel comfortable enough to share that with me. I considered it, just a great honor, really. And so I just wanted to share that, because that was really one of the most poignant moments I ever had with Patrick, and I'm grateful, very grateful for the experience.
He was so grateful that you were there too, and to share that with you. Yeah, I remember the night before Mary passed away. She was, terminal stages of cancer, and she was so very, very fragile. But he was playing Scrabble, and they actually had a wonderful talk about symphonies that they had played together. And what kind of happened is that something snapped. We don't know what, but something snapped, and eternally. But anyways, that morning, he was on morphine, and I remember we called Mark. Mark is an emergency medical.
I was a
He was a
paramedic.
paramedic. Yeah, he was a paramedic at the time, and he helped us figure out what was going on. Basically, we realized that it was over. And that night, that next morning, I went over to their house to look in on her, and I looked in on her, and she was still breathing. And then about an hour later, my dad came to my apartment, and he said, could you come with me? And we walked over, and she had passed away in that time. So, yeah, having you there, Craig, and having some other close friends was what got him through that. Bunny and Stephen Barnes have raised their hand, and before we do that, I want to try to quickly share another photograph here. I think you can see enough of him, but Steve Barnes was the best man at Patrick's first wedding to a woman named Leslie, and I've got a picture of that wedding, actually from exactly where we're broadcasting right now, from the Unitarian Church. And I don't know how well you can see it, but if you can believe it, that clean shaven guy with a full head of hair at the top and not much hair on the side, that you can see half of him on the right of that photograph. That is Stephen Barnes. That is the guy who is about to talk to us right now. So, Stephen, thank you for joining us, and would love to hear what you have to say about Patrick.
Oh, hi. I wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, to Becky, I well remember the Saliva Sisters. And going.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Steve.
Tried to wipe it.
You go fast as well.
Right. Buddy was there one year, and we came to the festival and saw the Saliva Sisters as well that year. Do I see? Tully. I don't know if you remember, I was in Salt Lake till 2011, I think it was. I was at the library. I saw you at the university a couple of times. Susu, I well remember that poem. Where are you? Oh, there you are, yes. I well remember that poem, and I remember it being on the wall, the restroom wall at the Sun, I believe it was, in Salt Lake City. And somewhere I still have a copy of that. I copied it, probably on toilet paper. Yeah, it was, that would be wonderful poem.
Yeah, huge fans.
I'm trying to think if I can quote anything from it. Did I remember any of that, the lines in it? When all I can think of is when what I want is blank, not Blake.
That was I remembered as well.
Yeah, that was a good one. Tully, the thing I wanted to say was, and what was interesting to me, was that you went to Manus. The teacher I had in New York was Leonid Bolatine. I don't know if he was still there when you were there. But anyway, that's where I studied in New York for about 7 months with Leonid Bolatine, who at the time I was studying with him was the classical guitar teacher at Manus. I had no idea that you had gone to Manus. That keeps showing up in my existence for some reason. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that. Patrick, I have a whole load of stories about Patrick. Unfortunately, most of them are X-rated, and I don't know that I dare relate most of those, if any, not in the present company anyway. You never know. But anyway, I did want to say too, back when I first met Patrick, at 60, maybe 59, 60, right after the Navy incident, when he'd just gotten back from the Navy, and he was fully bearded at that time. And I was in the theater department, and there was a place called the Playbox. I don't know if anybody remembers that. It was a kind of a theater in the round thing that was on campus. I was doing some kind of work on some play, either technical or at that point, it might have even been an acting role. Anyway, I came into the play box one night and there was this guy with a full beard sitting in the back room, and he was playing through this wonderful little, I had just begun. The only reason I ever learned to play the guitar was because my mother had an old Burl Ives songbook, and I wanted something to accompany my voice with singing those songs. And so mother had the guitar. I won't even go into the guitar story because that's a whole other story in itself. But anyway, I was playing her guitar and singing. It was an old guitar, what they called a woman's guitar at that time. That was about half size. Anyway, I did get an actual guitar, and I'd been plunking around on it and learning a few things here and there from people, but I was very elementary. And I came in and he was playing an etude, well, a little tiny etude out of the Shearer method book. He was studying. I know that Bill Fowler was mentioned earlier tonight. He was studying with Bill Fowler at the university, and this little etude was one of the things in the book. And I heard him playing this, and I thought, how is he doing that? And I went up to him and I said, what is that you're playing? And he showed me the music and he played through it. And I just thought that was the most wonderful thing I'd ever heard. Later on, when I got to know Patrick and we would meet over at his folks' house, he had a room downstairs and he would be playing things out of, because he was still studying with Bill Fowler. He had the Segovia method or the Segovia transcription of the Fernando Soares studies. For you who aren't guitarists, you have probably no idea what I'm talking about, but there's one etude in particular in that book that still reminds me of him, because that might have been one of the first things I heard him play out of it. But anyway, it's the B minor number 5 prelude. So every time that I play that now, I always think of him. And there's one other etude in there that always reminds me of your father, Dylan and Mark. There's much more about our trips from Nevada to Salt Lake and sometimes back again to the coast. But I won't go into those because they get kind of graphic, actually. And to tell the story with its full effect, you got to tell the full story. So,
and Patrick and Mary were our witnesses at our wedding in 2011.
Yes, they were.
It was our second or third wedding. I don't remember.
Right.
I just keep coming back. I don't know why.
Yeah, that was in Salt Lake. So anyway.
Well, Stephen, I don't maybe we won't be telling him now, but I would love to hear the stories, regardless of their rating, from you at some point.
Okay, I'll keep
we'll
that.
We'll do a private Zoom call.
I'll keep that in mind. But maybe or maybe not, you may not want necessarily to hear them. But in any case, what you did tonight with the memoriam and the celebration, thank you so much, so much.
Thank you for coming.
He was just 80, so he's Patrick age.
And sorry, I miss him so much. Anyway, I really appreciate what you did and what you're doing now, and to see Susu and Tully and Becky.
And you guys.
And you guys. I mean, God. I remember those days in both of your cases because I was there back and forth over the years, and we always kept in some kind of contact. I'm not good about contact when I'm out of town, but I always looked him up when we were, or I was. And that's another story. But anyhow, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you all. God
Cathartic.
bless.
It's cathartic. Thank you so much.
Yes.
One thing I want to share real quick. I know that Paulie talked earlier, but I think he's still on the phone. And it's another picture. I've spent so much time going through so many scrapbooks in the last few months that I've got thousands of these pictures
We
in
have
my mind.
piles and piles and piles
of them.
in our house.
Let me share one real quick. I think this is a sketch that I think Martin may have done of Tully.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so check that out. It's pretty cool. One other person I'd like to call out, who I know is on this call and who's joining us from Italy, is Paul Byer. And so, Paul, I wanted to say thank you so much for joining us, and also thank you. The lute music that we heard at the beginning of the memorial service, he recorded, specifically for Patrick.
Thank you. There's, listening to all you guys talk about Pat brings up a lot of memories for me. I don't want to bore you with them, but Pat, when I first started studying guitar with Pat, he was my first guitar teacher, and I was about 8 years old, I think. And like the first thing he gave me was that Alan Shearer book, and all those etudes. So that really comes home. It's funny listening to you talk about that period. And I don't know, you could help me with this, but it's funny because people probably don't have too many memories of their childhood. It's hard to remember things before you're like 15 years old. But there's one memory that I really have that stuck with me forever. And it's still vivid. And I think I was 7 years old. And my parents took me to, of all places in Salt Lake, the Jewish Community Center. They had a little summer festival. And, I was sitting up in the places where people sat, and there was a little spectacle going on. And it was Patrick playing folk songs on the guitar. And, I'll never forget that image. And that was the first time I'd ever seen Patrick. And I was totally, fixed, how do you say it? Sort of entranced by that. That's probably why this image has always stuck with me. And then afterwards, my mom said, well, you seem to have liked that. And I said, yeah, that was really, really cool. And that's when I wanted to start to play the guitar. And my parents knew Martin. My father was, I think, one of the founders with Martin of the Salt Lake Chamber Society. And so they knew him. So they fixed me up a lesson with Patrick. And that went, and so I went every day to, to Martin's house on Laird Avenue. With that wonderful wallpaper. I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of that. For a couple of years, and then Patrick just disappeared. He took off. But that must have been around 1968, 9. I don't. You probably have Patrick's biography more better, than I do. I mean, this was like between.
But
so I mean, like I know afterwards I think he went to the Navy afterwards, or he went to Paris, and then maybe he went to San Antonio. I mean, he just disappeared for after those 2 years of guitar lessons. I'll never forgive him for that. But on the other hand, I'll also never forgive him for making me love the guitar and later on the lute and completely changing my life. So anyway, that's what I have to say.
Thank you so much, Paul. I will say that, I think there are many professional musicians on this call, and as professional musicians, you're almost certainly going to spend, fair amount of time, or at least some time, teaching music and giving lessons and the like. And it's a rare thing when somebody that you've taught goes on to become a great professional musician themselves. And so, Paul, I think you actually kind of spoiled my dad a little bit, and that I think you were one of, if not his first students as well. And his first student went on to become one of the premier lute players in the world. So I think he kind of hit it out of the park on the first one, and said, "All right, success done."
That's nice of you. I mean, it's funny. It's like I've never really lived in the same city as Pat. Just for like 2 brief periods. That when I was 7 years old, and then when I came back from London in the late 70s. And we just, we've only ever lived in the same city in those times, but I've always had very strong contact with Pat throughout his life and my life. Every time I went to Salt Lake, which was quite often, I would visit him, and we'd always we had a very strong bond. Up to the months before he died, we had a Skype call. So it's been a big part of my life.
Big part of his too. Thank you. So we are approaching 5 o'clock, but
Right.
I don't want to end it before, if anybody has anything else that they might like to add, please let us know.
Dylan,
Yes.
I have to go, and I have tried sending messages to people, but apparently I don't know how to do it. But I've gotten some addresses in any event. Thank you so much, both of you. You were splendid. And I hope our relationship with you and Marek will continue. Thanks a bit.
Let's make it happen. Thank you so much, Susu.
Goodbye.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the memorial service and for this reception. Meant a lot to me and to us. And some of the people that my dad knew the best and loved the most were on this call right now. And thank you for being a part of his life, and for all the memories that I know we are all going to treasure and to make a part of our lives going forward. So,
is the service recorded?
Yes. So the service, and even this call, I probably should have announced that at the beginning. This call was actually recorded as well.
Could be used in a court of law.
Yeah. The service was recorded. This call was recorded, and we will, I will put those on YouTube, and I'm got links to everybody today, and they'll also be up on Facebook and probably up on patrickzwick.com as well. So
Thank you.
thank you, everybody, and love you all, and yeah, wonderful day.
Love you too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.